Today, on The Designer Recruiter, I'm joined by Kerem Cengiz, Managing Director of LWK. With over 25 years of experience spanning Europe, Asia, and the GCC, Kerem brings a refined, context-driven approach to architecture, master planning, and placemaking. His work spans design leadership, education, and advocacy, shaping how the profession evolves globally. In this episode, we'll explore what leaders really look for in designers today, how studios attract and retain talent, and why supporting parents in the workplace is an increasingly important part of building healthy, modern studio cultures. Kerem, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Esther. It's really lovely to be here.
You've built a strong international career. Can you share a bit more about your journey and how you came to lead LWK?
Okay, I'll try to sort of précis it because it's been sort of all over the shop. But I studied architecture in the UK. I did my part 1, my part 2 in the UK, and I then in my year out, my first experience of working in architecture was in Moscow in 1994. So 2 years after the Berlin Wall had come down and Russia was opening up. So that was a really remarkable experience. At that time, there was a recession in the UK, so I was working for a Turkish contractor as a site architect. So we would live on the site, 12-hour shifts for 3 days and then a day off, and then I keep going. And you do that for 2 weeks, and then you get a weekend. So I did that for 6 months. I did some work in Turkey, and then I came back to the UK, and I studied my postgrad at the Bartlett in London at the UCL. And then I started working in the UK to get my part 3. So I was working with a company called Shepherd Epstein Hunter that was amazing. Actually, that organization and the way that organization was run, I think has really very much set the foundation of how I perceive good working environments and mentoring and team camaraderie. And that stayed with me my whole life. And I've actually, that's sort of an interesting segue into the companies that I've worked for, in terms of every company that I've been fortunate enough to work for, I've had a good mentor. Whether they know it or not, I've found an individual in that organization that I look to as someone who I can learn from. And so I had several good mentors at Shepherd Epstein Hunter. And each step in my career, which you can easily find on LinkedIn, was a very defined decision in terms of understanding the person I wanted to be as I am today, as it were. I came out of the Bartlett. It was a very tough experience. It was a very competitive environment. It was a very sort of high concept environment. It was good, but quite punishing. And at the end of that process, I wasn't sure that I really wanted to be an architect.
Oh, wow.
And so I stepped out, and before joining practice, I worked on a construction site for 6 months. And then I remembered why I wanted to be an architect, because that's really hard work as well. So coming back into architecture was sort of great, very exciting to be at Shepherd Epstein Hunter. But I very quickly realized that there were people out there that were naturally better at designers than I was. So being a design architect wasn't something that I really saw myself wanting to do, because, you know, the idea of not being able to progress as smoothly, you know, I eventuated good design, but it was a struggle. You know, it was always full of angst and difficult journeys, whereas others seemed to flow into that process. And I thought, is this what I want to do do I want to wake up as I am now at 54 in a few days' time and still be in a position where I'm just struggling? And the very simple answer was no. So the next question was, what do I want to be? And I at that stage, within that very few months of being at SEH, it became very clear that the mentors that I saw around me, the directors of the business, are the people that I wanted to emulate. Or at least not necessarily emulate, but have my own version of who they were. And that meant directorship, business leading. And so to get there at that stage, the industry has moved on a great deal now. People are much more stratified. At that stage, to be an architect, it was to be an all-rounder, to be able to design, to be able to detail, to be able to manage subconsultants, to be able to project manage, to be able to detail your building, to write specifications, manage contracts, be on site. And so, and then of course there were all the other aspects of the operational aspects of the business: manage the finances of the team, do the resourcing, do the BD, do the marketing. And so every step in my career has been a journey to fulfill those skill sets that has led me to where I am today. So that's that journey. And it's taken me around the world. You know, in the UK, I ended my last practice in the UK was Chapman Taylor. And again, that took me back. A lot of my career revolved around Russia and the former Soviet Republic. So across a sort of a span of about 15 years, I've either worked or lived in that sphere. So my final job at Chapman Taylor was leading their and setting up their Ukrainian business in Kiev. That story is a very sad story right now. That doesn't exist anymore. But that was my final job before I then moved into Australia. And I lived and worked in Australia for 5 years, working on projects both in Australia itself. I was based in Melbourne, which is a fantastic city. And I was also doing projects in Southeast Asia. And after 5 years, I became a citizen of Australia. So I have dual nationality, Anglo-Australian, with a Turkish background.
What a mix!
It's an interesting mix. I mean, obviously the real me is the Anglo-Turk. Obviously, I speak with a British accent because we left Turkey when I was 6, and I did my whole education through the UK. But my father's family is still in Turkey. We have property in Turkey as a family. We go there in the summer holidays. It's a fabulous place to be, and of course, my foot is in both cultures. And maybe this is something we'll come back to later in terms of other questions. And then I was approached by Tala, who is our head of regional marketing, who was at a different practice then, and she approached me through LinkedIn and said, "We're looking for an MD for this business. Would you like to come and join?" And I thought, yes, let me try something new. So I think my career has also been one of knowing when one has reached one's potential somewhere, and whether or not the desire to remain in that sort of status quo is something that you're okay with, or is there a desire to continue to adapt and evolve in a different direction? And at that point in my career, the Middle East was exciting. It was coming back after the financial crisis. This was in 2015. And 10 years on, I'm still here. And 7 years ago, we established LWK. And it's the longest I've stayed at any practice. And I think that speaks volumes about the work we do, what we've achieved, the investment I've made personally and professionally, and those of our colleagues in the business, and the potential I feel that this region still maintains for me. And, and not to sound selfish, but you have to feel for yourself before you can actually dedicate yourself to doing a good job for an employer.
What you talk a lot about self-awareness. Like you always say, I knew for my career, like you didn't enjoy so much the site. Then you said like you wanted more leadership. So how can someone have more self-awareness? Because I think that's most people lacking. They just go to a job for the wrong reason, financial reason, or no, financial reason can be a good reason sometimes. But I wish more people have more self-awareness.
Look, I mean, it's a very esoteric question in the sense that, how do you become aware of yourself? I mean, I think my life's journey has probably forced on me certain things that I've had to absorb that have then become actually very useful tools later in my life. I mean, my parents separated when I was very young. My father was a very difficult individual. He disappeared from my life when I was 7, and that left me with lots of issues to deal with, and they still remain. The things that you are impacted as a child, they're a legacy that runs through your whole life. I mean, the way they impact you and the way they affect, they evolve. But that also, makes you very sort of, in certain respects, very introverted. And so you look at yourself. And I think one of the things for self-awareness is introspection, and actually realizing that if you want to achieve certain things in life, you have to think about what those are. And it's not just going to be, it's very few people who are offered opportunity. I mean, many are, but most of us aren't. And so if you do want something, you have to really think about what that is to achieve it.
Yeah,
There's no mystery. It's about identifying what it is that makes you happy as an individual, but as a professional. I mean, I think really ultimately it all has to start within yourself. If you're not happy as an individual, if you can't find peace within yourself or about yourself, the ability to then make right decisions about your career will always be fundamentally handicapped by that lack on the other side of yourself, which is, who you are internally. And when you find that level, I mean, I can only really say I'm beginning to find it since I came to the Middle East, since I married my wife, and since we adopted our daughter. And that's been a sort of a 10-year journey. But knowing what you don't want is a good start to knowing what you want. And that's how I started, knowing that I don't want to just be unhappy 20 years from now and regret that I didn't make any choices. And when you're young, at least the choices that you make are ones that you will regret less, because you still have time to change path. And even at my age, the ability to change path is really about assessing the level of desire and how much energy I've got left to do it. Simple as that. If I've still got the energy, another career move could well be possible, or a life change, I think, is inevitable. I mean, 54, 55 is still relatively young now. I mean, I don't really understand what it means to be in my 50s. I feel remarkably undifferent from my 40s, other than just a bit wiser and a bit grayer.
So let's go back to LWK a little bit and your international experience. So you have studio internationally. How is it to hire for? First of all, how is the culture different from one country to the other?
It's remarkably different. I mean, even between Hong Kong and China, there are significant cultural differences between the Cantonese and the Mandarin elements of Greater China. That includes Hong Kong. Obviously, Hong Kong, having been a colony, has been more exposed to other ways of working, so that the interface between Hong Kong and Dubai is much smoother, and not smoother, but just there are nuances in terms of working methodologies. I mean, Hong Kong is very much based along the RIBA line, so there are interfaces that are very common across this region in Hong Kong. So work stages, everything like this becomes considerably easier. What the big challenge with Hong Kong, though, is it takes a lot longer to eventuate a project from inception to completion on site than it does here. Here, it's a very, very quick turnaround in the design phases and the construction phases. And so getting people up to speed on that is difficult. Culturally, it's also challenging in the sense that Eastern cultures are very different. Their center is in a completely different place. Whilst the commerciality of projects may be the same, how people look at the world and how they respond to that then is very much rooted in where they come from and the everyday existence. And I think that's what is the key to build strong cross-cultural teams, is finding people who are able to understand that difference, not necessarily understand the fundamentals of that culture, but understand that there is a difference in how we have to come together. And that effectively is a commonality that applies wherever you work in the world.
So as an example, when you hire for LWK, how do you take this in consideration, and how can someone, what would be the ideal candidate, for example?
There is not really an ideal candidate, because architecture is such a broad church, that you can have many different roles that can fit many different personalities and also many different cultural tropes. And so I think you have to look at the position and find the person for the position, not the position for the person. Ultimately, we know that in architecture we have a series of functions that we have to perform. There are a myriad of people who could perform that function. So it's not just about them being able to perform it, it's how they then fit inside the family. That's the business. And so it's not just about their technical competence or their racial background or how much they want to earn, is how do you fit with us? And do you think you can fit with us? Ultimately, it's not us just picking. It's very difficult because people, the whole interviewing process can be very intimidating for people. Often people are desperate for a change, or they need a change and they're looking for something. If you make decisions under pressure, you'll make bad decisions. And I think, in the process, as well as an organization that's employing people and offering people opportunity, we have to be mindful of that, in the sense that, they're choosing us as much as we're choosing them. If we want them to perform to the best of their ability and maximize their potential, if we come across as an organization which they can't fit, then if they choose us, they're choosing us for the wrong reasons. They're choosing us because probably a financial reason or a job, filling a job reason, rather than, I see this as an entity or an organization that I feel a part of. Like I said with Shepherd Epstein Hunter, it was a family. The way they worked together and the way we lived together as a team. We didn't just live in the office, we lived outside of the office together. We partied together. We explored together. We hung out together, at different levels, but we all did it. And when we came together as a group, it was always a very happy experience. And you obviously, right time, right place, but this is what we try to aim for.
Is it the secret to make a great studio culture? Because you did mention that in this company the culture was amazing, and you kind of...
It really is. I mean, it's about how as people you work together. I mean, having those interpersonal relationships, no matter the hierarchy, if you can't, as a leader, be able to interface with your members of staff, how can you expect them to feel comfortable? And we work with cultures that are perhaps very hierarchical. So, whether it's Indian with their own systems, whether it's the Filipino community, when we first opened our office, we brought a young chap called Patrick. He was working as where we first established, it was a serviced office, and he was working as a sort of not a T-boy, but a sort of a general cleaning up the place and facilitating different things. And we said, we need someone like that for the office. So we brought him. But over the years, we've made it, he's now a document controller in the business. But he was always calling me sir. And I was like, no, Pat, I can't. I'm not comfortable with you calling me sir. And you call me Kerem. He said, no, I'm not comfortable calling you Kerem. It's my culture that I need to show you respect. And then I said, well, okay, sir's not on, Kerem isn't on. You come up with another time. He calls me boss. So if that makes him comfortable, but I don't want to. I want to break down between individuals. I want to break down the barriers. In the context of delivering work, yes, there has to be hierarchy, and when decisions are made, there has to be hierarchy. But on how we achieve the results on a day-to-day business, it has to be between people who have mutual respect for each other.
So your door is open?
Yes. Even though I have an office and it is now separated from the main studio, the door is always open. When it's closed for a reason. It's usually because I'm having a private conversation with somebody. But other than that, the door is always open, and I make a really good coffee, and I encourage guys to come up and spend time with me. And, often they don't, but when they want to, they can.
So we talked a little bit about this before. So I found you actually quite approachable, but some people are very, very impressed just by titles because you're an MD. And do you think sometimes you have to be kind of a tough leader as well? Because you mentioned this part of being approachable, open door policy, but there is the other side with angry client, for example, or...
Yes, I mean, look, not only with an angry client, but even with your own team. I mean, there are occasions when we have to be firm with members of staff, either through non-performance or actually bad behavior. And there've been a number of occasions when you have to let people go as well because of that. So you have to sometimes be quite tough. Look, I think it depends on your definition of toughness. I think toughness comes through honesty. And if there are difficult scenarios, you have to be prepared to be honest about it and have the difficult conversations. You can't avoid them. How you have those conversations is also important, knowing when to be approachable in that difficult scenario, when to be understanding that you are possibly not in the best position, so you have to build a rapport with the person you're having, but you can't be afraid to say no. But you also have to be prepared to give in.
I'm still working on this, that's why I'm smiling. I'm a bit of a yes person, and I have a company, I have employees as well. And I know what you mean, but it's really hard for me.
It's very tough. I mean, when you're self-employed, it's a lot harder than when you're like me, where you're an employee and you have a large organization behind you. But, ultimately the fear of famine and that fear drives you to say yes. It's very dangerous in the sense that it often, in the long run, leads you to a worse scenario than you might have done if you had cut your losses earlier on. And, being able to say no to someone who wants a big discount and knowing that you're going to lose the job, you're going to lose anyway, financially at some point. And the people that will suffer the most on that journey will be your staff, not you as a leader.
I agree. If you were starting your career today, what would you focus on learning first?
That's a really tough one. I think, that's a really tough one.
Because the industry changed so fast.
It has changed fast.
Right?
I mean, ultimately,
it wouldn't be the same thing as when you started, for sure.
Look, let me sort of come at it a slightly different direction. The people that I see coming out of university now are so different from the people that came out of university previously. Technology has moved on so far that their own skill sets are very different. I think really learning to learn is probably the thing that I would go for it, because I think what we find now is that young professionals are responding to what the industry wants. So it's very technologically driven, but technology can't replace life learning experiences. And so being able to, the machine can't eventuate everything. Yes, maybe the machine can do a lot, but does that enable you to make or to use your own judgment to understand whether that end product is the right product for what you're seeking? And so if you divest yourself of the skills required to be an architect, and that really does mean being able to draw, because if you can't look up and down a sector, if you're doing, we're having challenges now. We've got very competent designers who are, technical designers who are looking at details, but they're looking at them in isolation. They're not looking at them vertically up the building, horizontally across the building. And so you're solving this problem, but you're not actually, that may be causing problems over there. And that ability to go from macro to micro and micro back to macro to see that your decision making or your design process is valid is something that I think is really important. So that ability to be distant and close and learn that learning is a really important aspect that's continual, and not over-rely on the tools, but you are ultimately the best tool yourself, your brain.
Do you think the new generation struggle more with feedback as well, if you want to teach them a lesson, for example?
Look, feedback is really important, being able to be self-critical. And again, it's that introspection I was talking about earlier. Yeah. It's self-critiquing. It's okay to be wrong, but it's not okay not to listen. And if you're not prepared to listen, certainly in my environment, you're not welcome. because it's the smallest courtesy that you can offer your colleagues is to listen to their opinion. I mean, at the end of the day, opinion is opinion. You can have opinion, I can have opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean either one is right or wrong, but we have to come to a shared view to make something right. Okay. In designing, yes, there are certain things that are definitely right, but there's several different ways to get there. So having the ability, there seems to be an impatience amongst the younger generation to progress through their career, which is perfectly reasonable ambition, but it's not reasonable to sort of think you can be the top of the tree when you've only done 3 or 4 years, and there's people out there who have been around a lot longer that are still at the same position as you are and who are hard grafting and are satisfied with what they have. But that doesn't mean that they're not worthy of respect, or that what they contribute is anything less than the MD. In actual fact, they have found a niche that they're happy with, and that should be respected because they're probably very good at that, and they're in that position for a very specific reason. So specialism has value, but really, if you specialize too soon, when you get 10 years down the road, it might be too late to then expand or be prepared to start from the bottom again.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I've been doing this podcast for a while, and it seems that's what I hear the most, like almost attitude, as you say, being able to take a bigger view, to learn, is always more important than talent.
Look,
because when we think architecture, we think you need to be talented, you need to be able to be so creative, you need to be 1 in a million almost.
Well, not everyone can be 1 in a million, otherwise there'd be a million, you'd be 1 in a trillion, or a million in a trillion. Look, at the end of the day, I don't particularly perceive myself as a brilliant person. I just know what I'm good at, and I work very hard on that. And there are a number of things that I do well, and I put them together and I come up with a result. I'm not a genius. And I say to our team, we don't have to be the best, but when we all come together and work together as a team and we understand what we need to achieve, we can be one of the best teams. And yes, within the organization there are stars. Certainly there are stars in my organization, people that I rate incredibly highly, are super intelligent. But the majority of us are fairly normal people who have an above average level of intelligence, and we work together to eventuate good results. So I think, yes, it's attitude. You can be the cleverest person in the world, but a real rotter, and someone who just causes problems and causes difficulty, doesn't work in a team environment, and you won't contribute anything valuable. And we've had people like that come and go. And that has to be identified very quickly. That's why I say during the interview process, understanding if people can respect our culture as much as us believing they can come into they can be part of our team is important. You need to be able to work with people in this industry.
How do you understand that during the interview? Do you have a specific question that you ask?
No, I think it's how people carry themselves. Okay. I think it's unique from position to position. I wouldn't say I'm the best judge of character either. In the journey of 7 years, I've made a number of bad choices, but I've dealt with them. With all the best will in the world, I'm probably not as hard as I should be in terms of seeing problems and addressing them more quickly. I think one of my team members says, I have an abundance of compassion. And I think that really is probably my weak point, is that I know that people, I've come across very few malicious people in our business, and I know that everybody is genuine and they're trying their best, and so when someone's trying their best, you try to support them as much as you can. I mean, unfortunately, there are some times when you just can't, and those are difficult. So no, we haven't had too many of those situations, but I find those moments very difficult because I know what it means to lose your job. I've lost my job several times in the past, and I know what that fear that generates, the anxiety that comes, the responsibilities that people have. I've been very fortunate to have a very strong family around me and friends that have supported me through those difficult times. But one of those very hard times for me when I was in Australia, I mean, I went through a divorce and lived alone for 3 years, going through all of that associated, I wouldn't say trauma, but all the personal issues that one has to address through what that means to get for a marriage to break down. It's never one directional. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to deal with this, I have to deal with it properly, because I didn't want to live alone for the rest of my life. I wanted to have another chance. But I said to myself, I can't keep making the same mistakes, because there are clear mistakes that we all make. And that's, again, coming back to the introspection. You have to look at yourself honestly.
We are talking now a bit more about your personal life, so
Sorry.
let's go into... No, it's a good one. I love it. And I want to understand also, because when I met you, I think that's when you started supporting the Return to Work mom. And I thought that was brilliant that you come into this journey. And you mentioned about your adoption. You also mentioned a little bit earlier now today. Can you talk us through this journey? So you recently adopted your daughter?
Sure. Look, I mean, just step back to the Return to Work mums. As I said earlier in the session, my father disappeared from our life when I was very young, and he left in a very difficult way, with lots of sort of impact both on my mother and myself. And so Mum and I were single family, single parent family for a long time. And this was back in the UK in the late 70s, early 80s. It wasn't easy. My mum was amazing, and she is amazing.
Do you have siblings as well? Or?
No, not from
from
the first marriage. No, I have multiple siblings from both parents' second marriages. But we were together for a long time, and we left Turkey, where I was growing up and very happy, came back to the UK in the late 70s, early 80s, which was a very different world than it is today. And she had to work. We had grandparents around. But what I saw her go through, what we went through as a mum and son, was tough. And my mum's tough as nails. I mean, she's an amazing mother, but strong. Her career has been remarkable. She's rebuilt her life. She remarried when I was 11, and that in itself had other traumas. But for that period of time, as a single mum, and as the mum of a child that was then the stepson of a wonderful man who I really perceive as my father. My stepfather is actually my dad. He's dad. And I didn't see it for a long time. And a lot of the things that I'm going through now, he went through. And so he went through all the various traumas that I carried with me. Poor man. We always joke that he lost his patience with his own sons because of the crap that I put him through. But so that part of my life is really now informing where I find myself today. Really interesting how the cycle has sort of come in this way. But the journey with Return to Work Mums was because of that. It really means something to me. The person I am today is the person that my mum helped me to become. And so mums who work have a really tough job, single mums especially, but any mum who is juggling a career and children, dads, you really don't know the story. It's not easy. So that's why I feel very, very passionate about that.
How do you manage to switch off from your work? Because your responsibilities are enormous.
There are some things you can let go of. But you have to accept it as you step into that role. You have to accept that this part of that life comes to you. And so you have to just find ways of accommodating it without sacrificing too much of the other things. But it is a sacrifice. It's absolutely a sacrifice. And
I love how you open up, and that's something like I see in you from since I met you. And I feel men don't usually are not able to be vulnerable like women are. I don't know if you see it, but why do you think men don't open up on this kind of topics?
I think it's environment. I mean, it's nurture rather than nature. I mean, as human beings, I think we're all able to be emotional. I think the environment that we grew up in and how our parents enabled us um, has a big part to do with that. A lot of this stuff comes very early. It's not something that comes later. And then again, having that ability to feel safe to be able to talk about stuff is really important. So even, I mean, there have been very difficult situations for several of my senior staff this year. I'd rather not go into the details,
No, of
but
course.
it's been really super hard for them. Not forcing people to emote is very important. Allowing people to know that you're there for them if they want it is often a trigger that allows them to. One was a lady, and very private lady, but she was able to share a very tragic situation. And the other one's a gentleman, and he was able to also do that in his own way. And it's the first time I've seen him cry. And
Oh, wow.
and I think he valued that.
It's okay to cry in the workplace, and then how do you, yeah?
Of course. I mean, we were in a private room, but I mean, crying is a release. I mean, the things that happen to people are so personal, individual, that you have to be okay to let people, and you have to let them feel safe around you for them to do that. And sometimes they can't stop themselves. And so that's not something that should be shameful. Tears are our way of letting go of emotional pressures, and so allowing someone quietly to release that pressure because they feel safe enough to. And then a lot of the people that we work with here, they don't have their families here. They are alone, they're isolated. They have friendship groups, but even within their own friendship groups, sometimes they don't feel safe. So for me, to know those individuals are able to do that in my presence is an incredibly humbling experience, and one that I feel very grateful that they trust me enough to do that. And I believe also have brought us as individuals closer together.
And I think it's brilliant because in other organizations, some people wouldn't be able to open up and they would just resign to go and deal with their problem.
And we've also had a similar experience. I mean, of a young person who just couldn't manage it, and I think that's it's perfectly okay. If they want to be back in the framework of their family, I think that's something that shouldn't be discouraged. And the one thing that we said to him was that if you're ever ready and you want to come back, your position is available for you.
That's brilliant. Because sometimes you have to compromise between your career and your personal life.
Absolutely.
But if you open the conversation early enough, you can do kind of a stay interview where you would understand how they will be able to stay and deal with their problem.
Yes, I mean, we had several of those conversations with him with different people, but the ultimate decision was his decision. And we said to him, we're not going to pressure you to stay. It's not actually work is, when it comes to these scenarios, work is totally, I don't care what deadlines there are. If someone is broken, someone is hurt, someone is emotionally torn apart, physically injured, work is irrelevant.
No, I agree. I'm already thinking the same as well. We fight so many battles, for example, but then if health don't follow, then the rest is not relevant anymore. So
whether it's physical or mental health.
Yeah.
And anybody who turns around to me and says, you need to get rid of this person from this project, I don't want them on my project, my answer is, that's not your choice to make. If you want to have a normal conversation about what's working, not working, you can have me, but I have selected this person. You can't come around just because I have a contract to deliver the project. If the project is being delivered, you have nothing to say. It's not acceptable. I don't like that person. And then to vilify them. And this has happened. We had a governmental entity that hired an external project manager to work on their part, and the leader of that team vilified one of my staff throughout the whole journey. And my team member was really broken. And I said to him, "Do you want to leave?" He said, "No, I'll stick with it." But they constantly this was a well-known project management entity in this country that actively vilified and humiliated someone on a daily basis. And that is disgraceful, and that shouldn't happen.
Did you take legal action, or you
We
encouraged?
didn't. We didn't take legal action, but I made it very clear in writing what I felt about that scenario.
Yeah, we need to speak about this stuff.
It also
the
put me in a
moment.
difficult position with that client. But I'm sorry that those sort of statements have to be made, whether people like it or not. I think why to be afraid of someone who can't respect you for defending other people and their not normal human rights or their common decency. If you're that person that I can have a difficult conversation with, and at the end of the day you can realize that that's like I had that today with somebody, they apologize at the end of the conversation. I respect them for that. And I apologize as well for also being firm back to them. But there is no place for anybody in society to treat someone badly for race, for gender, title.
I see how sometimes
anything.
People talk to my team and then it goes wrong. And I just pick up the phone and immediately the tone change. But I love how you stand for your team and
look, if I don't stand for my team, how can I expect my team to ever stand for me when it gets tough?
Yeah, but not all the leaders do it.
I can't. I would advocate that they should.
I have some quick fire question to finish, which will be a bit lighter. Basically short and snappy answer, whatever come to your mind. What quality you value the most in a designer?
Flexibility.
Portfolio or attitude, which matters more?
Attitude.
The biggest mistakes designers make in interviews?
Giving themselves too much credit and believing they're more than they really are.
So a bit being arrogant.
Yes, being
ego.
arrogant,
During the interview itself already they show the character?
Yes, of course.
Oh my God.
Look, I mean, sometimes arrogance is good. I mean, there's good arrogance, bad arrogance. You can tell the difference. Someone can be arrogant in the sense that they're confident in themselves, but not arrogant in the sense that deep down in their character that this will be something that leads you down a wrong path and they will become a troublemaker.
What makes someone stand out in the first 30 seconds?
Smile.
Body language. In office, hybrid or remote, what works best?
Both.
Hybrid.
Hybrid in the sense that you need to be flexible. Some people are very suited to it, are very motivated, will do the work. Other people just can't get themselves there. Other people need to be with other people. So it's individual, but hybrid I like.
But I see a lot of design studio owners still completely against any form, shape of remote.
Well, this comes back again to control. It's if I'm not in control, and that's probably a fear for themselves because they like to be in controlling the design. Lead designers are very generous in terms of allowing design to be without their touch. So that's where that comes from.
A leadership lesson you learned the hard way?
How to say sorry.
One change that would most improve the design industry?
Leaders that lead with compassion.
So it's a good thing. You did mention maybe some people tell you have too much compassion, because when you say that, actually I was thinking in my head, I think compassion is one of the only things that would never be too much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Unless you become a yes person like me, but that's another problem.
No, look, I mean, how a life without compassion turns into a sort of soulless and difficult and cold person, and that will affect your life eventually, personally. I think compassion is something that allows you to make better decisions, but at sometimes being too compassionate can also lead to bad decisions. But I think if you don't have compassion...
And it's emotionally draining as well, I think.
Can be.
To be too compassionate.
Absolutely.
Because then you take your problem at home, like you have to let go someone you wouldn't like... You will feel the same as them, so
yes,
double pain.
Exactly. I still think compassion is one that I would have there because I don't see enough of it here. And that might be where I'm also overcompensating.
Great. Before we close,
Mm.
is there anything important about this industry or architecture or anything that you think we didn't discuss and would you like to share?
Look, the thing I find hardest about this industry, and it's bothered me for a very long time, is that as an industry we don't protect each other. Okay, it's dog eat dog. It's a commercial environment, but we don't come together to protect ourselves. So we're always, the RFP bidding process is a race to the bottom, and we're all on that race. And then my life is about saying to you guys, we add massive value to the real estate industry, and we're paid nothing. We are often not treated well. We're often blamed for things that aren't our fault. We often have to take very extended periods to deliver projects that we're not compensated properly for. But without solidarity, without a community, we can't defend ourselves. We're all individual islands floating on the sea. And I think if I could change that, if we could come as an industry to have a position where we don't undermine ourselves by undercutting ourselves, that would be something that I would really cherish.
But did you say that's specific to architecture only, not interior design or not
As in the
engineering?
design industry generally, I mean, as an architect, I
Yeah.
will talk as an architect. I don't want to misrepresent interior designers. I mean, already it's clear that there's a big separation between architecture and interior design. I mean, interior designers are often seen as the stars rather than the architects. I haven't got an issue with that. I understand where that comes from. I'm really now talking about the architectural industry. I'm sure it paralleled in interior design in the other design sectors as well, but particularly in our sector, in architecture, we study for 7 years as a minimum to become a qualified architect. That's as long as a doctor, as long as lawyers.
Yeah.
And our industry is so less valued in comparison to those professions. And the value we add to our stakeholders is monetarily is tremendous. And yet we're continually squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And then there are questions why you missed this deadline, why are you not getting me the right resource, and your contract says you should. Well, you're driving us to the bottom. That living standards are going up, salary rates are not low. We are all connected, guys. Hello. This is not an independent line. What you guys do who sell property and push down to us, it has an impact. And that's a conversation that isn't had, and we don't have a voice for that. And I'm sure people will say, oh, this Kerem Cengiz, he's a troublemaker.
No.
If you want to perceive it like that, it's trouble. Or if you want to have a conversation about how we make this industry better, let's do that. That's a really good conversation to have, because what you charge us as a lead design consultant, or we charge you as a lead design consultant, is not even 1/10 the value of a studio apartment that you're selling on the market now.
So it's education on the client side, on the value.
I wouldn't be as arrogant to say
competition.
education. No, it's not education. It's about equality. Okay, or at least a balancing up of the line, because at the moment it's very, very, I'm seeing businesses going under and the market's getting harder. 26 is going to be a difficult year for a lot of people. And it's not good for an industry to see people collapsing. And that shouldn't be driven by the developers who are creaming off the top. That value should be shared, because in that sharing you get better product. It's a virtuous circle, and that circle is broken at the moment. It's been broken for a long time in this region, and it's not a discussion that we have. I mean, when I speak to individuals who work in development, and they get that, but their answer is, well, I'm not in charge. Okay.
Easy exit.
It's a very easy exit, but unless we all have that conversation, what we're trying to achieve here won't get better.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Kerem, for sharing all your knowledge, but also your story. It was
It's a
really
pleasure.
a pleasure to
And
have you
thank you so
today.
much for hosting me. It's always nice to be able to take an hour out of a day and have this sort of conversation. I have it very rarely. So thank you.